Most of us have heard the message loud and clear: saturated fat is bad. It's been blamed for heart disease for decades. But here's the truth: not all saturated fats are created equal. And today, we're going to break down why that blanket message is outdated and potentially harmful. First of all, what are fats and what are saturated fats? Fats consist of 3 fatty acid chains attached to a glycerol backbone. In saturated fats, the bonds between all adjacent carbon atoms in their fatty acid chains are all single bonds. In unsaturated fats, there are 1 or more double bonds between adjacent carbon atoms in the fatty acid chains. If there's just 1 double bond, the fat is monounsaturated. If there are multiple double bonds, the fat is polyunsaturated. There are 2 main types of saturated fatty acids found in our food: even chain and odd chain. Even chain saturated fats, like palmitic acid, which consists of 16 carbon atoms with no double bonds, or abbreviated as C16-0, and stearic acid, C18-0. These are the most common, and they make up the majority of saturated fat in our diets. But then we have odd chain saturated fats, like pentadecanoic acid, C15-0, and heptadecanoic acid, C17-0. And guess what? These odd chain fats might actually be beneficial to our health. Emerging research has shown that odd chain saturated fatty acids are inversely associated with metabolic diseases, like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. A 2021 study published in Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition found that higher levels of C15-0 and C17-0 in the blood were associated with a significantly lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Another study published in Scientific Reports in 2020 showed that increased levels of C15-0 and C17-0 are associated with lower risks of cardiometabolic diseases and lower mortality. Now here's something most people, and even most doctors, don't know. The guidelines warning against saturated fat are based mostly on observational studies. These studies found that saturated fat tends to raise LDL cholesterol, and then assumed that meant increased risk of heart disease. But what those studies didn't account for is that saturated fat mainly increases large, fluffy LDL particles, which do not adversely affect health. The dangerous ones? The small, dense LDL particles. Those are the ones associated with heart disease. And guess what raises those? High-carb, high-sugar diets. So, where do we find these odd-chain saturated fats? Animal-based foods? That's where. The amount of C15-0 in butter, especially grass-fed, ranges from 1 to 2% of its total fat content. Ghee has a slightly higher odd-chain content than butter. Hard cheeses like Parmesan and cheddar contain a good amount of C15-0, ranging from 1 to 1.5% of their total fat content. The C15-0 content in heavy cream can also range from 1 to 1.5% of total fat, depending on the cream's fat percentage. Another good source is whole milk, which supplies anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2% of its total fat as C15-0. The C15-0 content in pasture-raised lamb and goat meat can range from 0.6 to 1.2% of its total fat. This concentration may vary based on the animal's diet and age. Grass-fed beef typically contains higher levels of beneficial fatty acids than grain-fed beef. Its C15-0 content can range from 0.5 to 1% of total fat. C15-0 content in fish can vary widely, ranging from 0.2 to 1.0% of its total fat. Fish oil may contain higher concentrations, up to 1.5% of total fat. Free-range eggs contain anywhere from 0.2 to 0.5% of its total fat as C15-0. This concentration is generally higher than in eggs from conventionally raised hens. See the pattern? Grass-fed and pasture-raised animal fats contain more of these beneficial odd-chain fats. Despite this emerging science, the U.S. dietary guidelines still lump all saturated fats together. They recommend keeping saturated fat to no more than 10% of daily calories, about 22 grams for a 2,000-calorie diet. But they make no distinction between even-chain and odd-chain fats. And they fail to acknowledge the latest evidence showing no causal relationship between saturated fat in general and heart disease. So what can you do with all this information? 1. Choose grass-fed meat and dairy whenever possible. 2. Don't fear all saturated fats, but favor those from whole, minimally processed sources. 3. Limit industrially refined saturated fats like coconut and palm oil. 4. Focus on whole food sources rich in odd-chain saturated fats for a potential metabolic edge. So next time someone tells you all saturated fats are bad, you'll know better. Science is evolving, and so should our understanding of fat. If you found this helpful, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below to let us know about your favorite healthy fat source.